Hello, OverPower world. How is it down there? This is Marcel. Yeah, the OPGOAT coming at ya on the OverPower Mountain podcast. I got a doozy today. A bit of a unique podcast. This one was actually written in by a viewer. I guess not really a viewer or a listener, I would say. A current player in the tournament circuit. This gentleman overheard me slash, I was kind of talking in his direction as well about a story and a history about a certain deck in OverPower. And, he wrote in and he said, we talked about that deck and I overheard the story and I really think you should sort of cement it in OverPower history. A lot of people ask the question about it and it's sort of this enigma. And first off, before I get into what deck I'm referencing, I'm going to get into the person. I just want to say a big shout out to Laurence. Thank you so much for A, listening, and B, being a fan. Obviously, thank you. I do appreciate it. If anybody does have great show ideas, I definitely would love you to write in and tell me what you'd love to hear about, whatever it may be. So Laurence wrote in and again heard this story during a tournament food break and said, I think everybody should hear this story and I'd love to even for you to expand on it and hear more. So what we're referencing, or what I've been referencing now for a good 2 minutes of elusive opening, is the Lambo Deck. That's right, everybody. The Lamborghini Deck, or as it eventually became, the Cadillac Deck. So a lot of people have been curious. What is this deck? This deck I hear about, you read in the boards, everybody's like, what's this Cadillac variants? I don't understand. What is this? And then everybody, tries to put their 2 cents in as to what it is or, what it means to be a Cadillac variant. And it's probably better to get it from, I would say, the true source's mouth. And of course, that's always going to be me at the end of the day when it comes to OverPower. So I'm not going to reference it as the Cadillac Deck. I actually think, funny enough, that the Cadillac Deck is a Lambo variant, to give you the truth of the name. And we're going to get into sort of the heritage of the deck itself and sort of how it came to be and, how it ruled the day and how even today its name echoes in eternity. So the story kind of starts right back when first off, before I dive right into the story of the whole Lambo thing, I am just going to say a quick, obviously again to Laurence, thank you again for the deck for the deck idea, for the for the podcast idea. I do appreciate it, and I will actually next time I see you be giving you a set of mega powers. So again, thank you for writing in for that. So the history of the Lambo Deck. Now, I think the history of the Lambo Deck sort of brings you full circle around to the history of Phil Keffer and I. And I'm just going to take a brief second on this moment here. When OverPower came back in the Renaissance, and again, you will hear all this in an amazing OverPower history podcast when I get to this point of the autobiography, but when the Renaissance OverPower period came back, I want to say roughly around the 2015 period, a tournament was held actually in a church in Buffalo by Larry. Might have been a mission. But obviously it was the first tournament where all the people were sort of being called back to the OverPower world. And a big buzz was akin because I had gotten back into the game, obviously, being a bigger name back in the 90s. And a very good friend of mine, Phil Keffer, got back into the game as well. roughly around the same time with his cousin John. And so the big buzz was that, he was going to be at this tournament and I was going to be at this tournament. And of course, what would happen? Would even one of us win, or, do we still have what it takes? So to sum that tournament up, it wrapped up with me and him in the finals. But very quickly, it was very unique because we both sort of brought a meta deck of today. The deck I had brought was Iron Man, Heroes for Hire, and Beast the Brute with Old Spider Woman in reserve. And it was a great deck. Like, it brought a lot of oomph, and I was obviously capitalizing on the JWs. And I believe in the final game, I'm not sure if it's on camera. It might be in the grand scheme of things, but it was a wonderful game. I remember I was getting back into the game, and I don't generally play avoids for particular characters, and I happened to put Iron Man avoid in my deck. Obviously trying to, place it and give them a reason to go away from Iron Man, and then hopefully get to use his teammate avoid power card and draw. So I was really trying to sort of come with something with, obviously, remembering the Heroes for Hire of old and just how they could punch through anything. Well, Phil also came with a great deck, and he came to the finals, and he almost came with the full Lambo lineup. He came with a very Lambo-esque, a Lambo variant is what I would reference it as. And that's what he came to at the first tournament. So, like, he obviously came with a great, we both sort of came with, what I would almost call the metas of today already at the first tournament back, way back in 2015. So maybe even earlier. My dates are not always usually the greatest when it comes to that. So he decides to play Spawn, Starjammers, and Dark Beast with Doctor Strange in reserve. Great deck, obviously. Tons of team defense. Great one protects from the jammers, and then obviously Dark Beast offering you not only a crazy offsuit teamwork, but some great specials to go along with it. So I won't chive too much on that particular version of the Lambo variant because I do want to get to the actual crux of how the actual Lambo deck came to be. So fast forward now, that was, the first tournament back in the Renaissance. And I think we've been playing for maybe about a year, a little bit over maybe in that respect. And, at this point we had done several larger tournaments roughly around the Northeast and Central of America. Not Central America, central part of USA. Didn't want anybody out there in Mexico going, I missed a tournament. What's going on? No, not yet, my friends. I'm sure the local tournament scene may hopefully one day get to reach out down towards you. I'd love to go to an all-inclusive Mexican tournament. That already sounds like the greatest OverPower tournament alive. But shall we fast forward? So again, we played in this first tournament, and Phil did particularly win that tournament. Lucky for him. Pivotal, crazy game between the two of us. But as we continued on, both of us, starting new deck ideas and culminating different metas, the deck meta started to shift towards not only particularly energy decks, obviously because there's such a plethora of energy characters that you just really it's endless, the particular construction of energy decks that are available in the game of OverPower. So the meta obviously started shifting towards this. A lot of people were starting to play, including myself and Phil, and other top tier players, started playing decks that were, energy 8 based. So a lot of Inhumans, Spawn decks, those type of things were sort of being created back then. 3/8 style decks, and I remember going to myself, I started, not really being happy with the way OverPower was sort of being played at the time. And I said, I don't think you need that many characters with 8s. I thought, special sets for particular characters might actually play better in the current game. I really felt like, Doctor Strange getting that 1 to 6 teammate Doctor Strange from reserve was truly just a changing point where you were able to sort of stick this 8 energy character in your reserve and not only back up your 8 energy stat, but also back up, just team defense. That even when somebody dies, it's not even like the other characters where, they can only defend teammates. In this particular case, you can defend him and the teammate. So it was truly on another level that you could have this character backing up your primary stat. So most people, again, like I said, were revolving around these multi-8 style decks. Well, I said to myself, I want more control in the game. And I was never truly a big Magic player, but I remembered two things in my mind. I remembered sort of like direct damage, and I remember being able to sort of like counter what the other person was thinking. And, for the Magic people out there, I believe those are red and blue style sort of thought processes to what I just said. And I thought about this a lot. I thought about like, how could this conceptual idea sort of come over to OverPower? And where could I find this sort of like mixture of control that I wanted on the other side of the board? So I started looking, and obviously, a negate is a fantastic way of controlling and countering essentially anything your opponent tries to do with a special card. But I also said to myself, I want to be able to control their board. A lot of current OverPower now sort of tries to control people's hands and, hand totals of cards and that sort of strategic idea. But back then it was all about placing. Everybody was, placing and running. And I obviously I didn't want to do that. I wanted to sort of like be able to control the board, but be able to battle like multiple rounds. So I really sort of skimmed the deck down of that idea of 3/8 and a 7 character, and I sort of skimmed it down to the idea that you really just needed the core center two of Doctor Strange and Spawn. It truly just gave you the defensive shell that any deck was really going to thrive off of, especially in this current day of OverPower, where teamworks were still sort of like a truly a big part of the current meta. So what happened is at that particular time I said, okay, I have my 2 center characters that I'm really trying to like push forward here, but how am I gaining control? And I looked at those characters, obviously energy based. You start, plummeting through all the different energy style characters. And, I ran across a couple great ones. Even back then, I thought they had at least some potential, but were missing a little bit of panache, like, the Mandarin and stuff like that. Like, where you could control the board with opponent discards and things along those lines. And I even thought about playing like the Flash on the front line, which I still think could actually be an amazing Lambo variant because he offers you such great speed and large specials and even drawing potential. And of course, the opponent discard is what I'm trying to reference here, the AI. So the AI special that I particularly like is the one that says opponent must discard 1 placed card. Now, I obviously love this, as we've spoken in other podcasts. I'm not going to, dwell on it too much. You have to negate that. That's not an avoidable card. Whereas something like the Iceman or the Iron Man version says target character must discard 1 placed card. Well, when you have the opponent one, not only in that particular world are you saying, you can't stop it unless you can negate it. And, negates are like medium, but like few and far between when you have a lot of big boy cards coming at the other opponent. So they have to choose. So these are great cards to have. So I started really try to primarily look for these. And then obviously I settled on a character, Scarlet Witch, at the time. She was obviously being played. She's never not been played in the game of OverPower. Let's put it that way. I wasn't, putting some sort of new wheel on a car here. So Scarlet Witch just was a basic fit right in with Spawn and Doctor Strange. Even though at the time, a lot of people were playing, like Mojo was really big in vogue because he was just helping you with the bigger point stat versions of 8 characters. So I decided Scarlet Witch at the time. I said, she gives me both the negate and the control card that I'm looking for at that particular time. And then I started continuing looking, and I was like, I want more control than just the 2 opponent discards from Scarlet Witch. I want more control than that. I'm looking for more. And I'm scared because all of that being in one character, obviously if my opponent kills that character at that particular time, your whole gimmick is gone. Not only do you lose your negates, but you lose the control of the other team's board because, that character was the one controlling the board with the opponent AIs. And then I came across an amazing character. And, I based a lot of my particular overpower play off this character. And I'm sure other people had played them this character, before I did, but I would say I really brought this character into the forefront and into the vogue of the tournament scene. And this character is a little tough to play, but offers you every treasure you could possibly think of as a special card. And the character I'm referencing is Ghost Rider. I hope you enjoyed that. Hold on. We'll do some effects. Ghost Rider. That's right. That's my, basic 90s effects here I got on the podcast. So I brought Ghost Rider in, and I primarily brought him in because of the opponent discard. I love it. Having 2 characters with AI specials, especially of the opponent variety, it truly just means that I am controlling everything when it comes to you placing on your side of the board. You place a big OPD, I'm going to get rid of it, unless you can play it before I possibly can get rid of it. But with that many opponent discards, I'm going to be getting rid of quite a few cards, let alone your, large 8 or something along those lines. So I really love this construction idea, and shockingly at that particular time, especially even in the Renaissance game, this deck had not been played. Ghost Rider was one of those quiet, unreally thought of characters because he really was just a max 6 in a lot of people's eyes. I looked at him a little bit bigger than that. I really looked at his inherent and said, Ghost Rider is built of a different ilk. That inherent ability of needing to have 4 icons to spectrum kill him essentially just makes most of the time that Ghost Rider is going to die is usually going to be through a cumulative KO effect. Now, there's many benefits to this, and we will cover that obviously in another podcast, but this again is about the Lambo deck. So at this particular time I just said, wow, this sort of like foursome of characters just truly, this is something different. This is defense. This is, while I'm trying to control the board, I have other specials to defend. And then obviously I was really even enjoying the grid because, Ghost Rider backed up the 6 fighting through Spawn. So the grid started even lining up nicely. And in my eyes, 2 8s, a 7, and a 6 was still very viable, especially with what I consider the resiliency of Ghost Rider. Now, obviously, most people who are listening to this podcast understand what Ghost Rider brings to a deck. I don't truly need to spell it out. But for the people who may just happen to be listening to this podcast before many others, Ghost Rider is just one of those top tier A plus characters. Again, at the time, it's not like there was a huge player pool that were just diving into a million strategic ideas. There was less than 100 of us playing this game through a tournament scene that was reborn decade after the 2 decades after the game died, plus. So, things were being found and sort of created as we all went along, and the meta was evolving. So at this particular time, Ghost Rider, again, for the newer listeners, multi-8, 1 per deck, draw 3, 1 per deck, Penance Stare, which is, target character must discard all placed cards and may not attack for remainder of battle, 1 per deck. Let alone a 6 energy AR special. The AI opponent must discard. AA Demon Chains, one of my favorite specials as well, for fighting attack that can just, speed off one of his specials additionally right after. So not only does he have all of that, but he also additionally has a DS special, which is where you can go get a Ghost Rider special. So if you have put at least one of those DS specials in, you can essentially, it acts as any Ghost Rider special in your deck. It just takes you, an action to go get the one you want. Really amazing character. I can't speak enough. It's true. He's probably, if not my actual favorite character in all of OverPower. He is my favorite character in all of OverPower. There is no actual character I love more than Ghost Rider. I've used him so much. He's brought me such good, success from so many different decks that I've put him in with different areas. Just phenomenal character. So, obviously, back to the story. Ghost Rider goes in the deck, just bringing the massive oomph to this defensive deck, a defensive sort of shell deck concept that I'm bringing to the next tournament. So the next tournament comes around, and it's a big one. It's actually in Ohio. I'm sure it was named one of the OP Cups. It might have been 2015 at that particular time. So it might have been 2014 when we first started this all again. Maybe along those lines. So it's 2015, maybe 2016, one of those. And I go to this tournament with this deck that I just mentioned, and there was also another card in there as well, which I will speak again about very briefly here. But let's just say the tournament went incredibly well. It was my first, rated and sort of, big version of an undefeated tournament. I went 10-0 that particular tournament. And I just remember feeling so good all day because I was just sitting there with cards where anything you placed, I could just control it off the board. It was almost every hand I had a card that could say, get rid of your best card. It was truly a great feeling for that particular deck and that particular day and that particular era. Again, a lot of people were playing any heroes in that particular era as well, due to the Devourer of Worlds still being a very viable card in the tournament scene. So, having the control of them placing either their defense or their big boy cards, it was really nice to sort of have that ability to sort of pick off what I wanted in that respect. So again, going 10-0, probably the highlight in the tournament was bringing the use of the Any Power teamwork to the tournament scene as well. People may have heard this in another podcast as well, but on a brief note, it was the first time that the Any Power teamwork sort of like saw the light of day. Most people saw it as, why would I play this teamwork? It has no color, it has no like purpose in a deck. It's, +0 +0. And I decided to use it because I just really saw the potential of not only being able to place this on any of my particular characters, but also being able to potentially hold this in my hand and pull off some big surprise string attacks. Now, one in particular did happen in that tournament where I was able to string off a 6-6-8. The great thing about the Any Power teamwork is, of course, you can use your main suit with the teamwork, whereas in most other teamworks, as I've described before, you're often having to use your secondary or tertiary sort of like suit to sort of like create your teamwork follow-ups. Well, a lot of the times, you can't get a lot of like your larger power cards to go with those teamworks. So in this particular case, you can use the 6 Any Power teamwork, a 6 whatever your main suit is, and an 8 in whatever your main suit is, and that's a cumulative KO. Well, I was doing this all tournament and people just started to catch on, and then, the rest, of course, is history as we know it. So this deck, of course, went undefeated and truly just was like phenomenal. It was something very different in terms of the control factor. And still to this day, I actually think that again, I would call it a Lambo variant. We very jokingly once, called it the Ferrari. And very much so, it's just forgotten in time, like Enzo Ferrari himself. Um, so of course, as we go on, the next tournament, dare I say, a star was born. I obviously thought, here I am, Don Mega, bringing the undefeated tournament deck to the next tournament, and I think it was the final tournament of the year, or I can't remember if it was the first tournament of the next year. And I remember settling in and just thinking, oh wow, I got this. And my obviously good friend Phil Keffer returned back to the tournament scene for the next tournament. He wasn't very happy to lose the last tournament to me, and he decided he wanted some vengeance. And he obviously looked at the structure of my deck, and then I would say he actually found the perfect combination. And even I could admit that as much control as the Ghost Rider version has, and I do really enjoy it. There are a few things that it doesn't bring that the actual Lambo does bring, and we're going to talk about all that right now in the second half of this podcast. So the Ghost Rider side of things, obviously, with Ghost Rider being 20 points, it forces you to actually play old Doctor Strange in reserve. Whereas when you're playing the Jammers version, you actually get the ability to play new Doctor Strange. And I just mean 4-stat Doctor Strange when I reference new and old characters. Now, this actually does create a difference in the deck, and we will kind of sort of get into that light sort of nuance of the great build of the Lambo. Now, these 4 characters are synonymous now with the Lambo. I guess you would say they're synonymous with the word the Cadillac, but I will explain to you why the Cadillac is merely a Lambo variant when it comes into it at end of days. So he brings this deck to the next tournament, and I believe he ends up winning the tournament and going 9-1. And the build of the deck is just beautiful. Not only are your 8s backed up, but the 7 fightings with Spawn and the Jammers are backed up. And then you really just get to flex out your 7s when it comes to Scarlet Witch on the other side. You use, of course, an Any Power, and you sort of flex down the middle of your 6s and 7s, where 1's on each side of the board. Of course, Spawn gets to use everything, and it's just one big happy family. It's an amazing deck. We're going to really get into the nuances of the deck right now and the build of it. I'm even going to sort of break it down when it comes to it. So the way it kind of worked was, it's just all gas. It's all gas, it's super fast, and it gives you enough defense to deal with the few attacks that your opponent could potentially bring your way while you pile on more gas in every action you have. Now, people are like, what does this mean, gas? And like, what are you talking about? And what I mean by gas is just like big boy cards, like big cards that your opponent has to deal with. And then when they come back at you with whatever it may be, a teamwork, a power card, a special, you innately have this sort of blanketed team defense through negates, spawns 1 to 9 avoids, and Doctor Strange's 1 to 6 avoids. Well, of course, Starjammer's bringing all of the said gas to the deck. Now, the way you look at this, though, is that it's not just all gas. It's truly a perfectly balanced piece of machinery. Okay, as we started to mention, when you're balancing a deck, you're always looking at grid backup. If I'm putting a power card in, is that just for this character, or can multiple characters play it? Well, in this particular deck, let's just talk about grid and power cards to start with. So obviously when it comes to grids, you have the 8 backed up between Spawn having the 8 energy, as well as Doctor Strange in reserve having the 8 energy. Then of course for your secondary stat, you have Starjammers having the 7 fighting, and then Spawn of course backing up the 7 fighting. On the other side, of course, you have Scarlet Witch having the 7 energy, and Spawn backing up the 7 energy. Well, in this deck, in this version, you actually get a third stat that a lot of people don't truly recognize when they're building out the Lambo, because I think in the Cadillac, a lot of people started to step away from this and sort of play a more generic build that everybody sort of could use. Now, what I'm referencing is, usually in the Lambo version of the deck, the 5s start to fall into the intellect range, okay? Now, of course, you're like, well, only certain people can play them. Well, at the end of the day, you're usually at that particular time in the power card grid of things, you were playing 3 5s. And so you would actually play 2 intellect 5s, and you would play 1 of the 5 multi-powers. So obviously, someone like Spawn always had the ability to access at least 1 5. But your other 3 characters could actually use the intellect 5. Now this created a really amazing scenario for you, because not only could 2 of your frontline characters play the 5 intellect, but they could essentially both place it. Now when they can both place it, they can both use it for teamworks as well. And of course in the Starjammers area, you can get that multi-5 placed as well as an additional power card, which of course, an amazing inherent for, again, an all-gas style character. I would say that Starjammers and Ghost Rider are just 2 characters of an ilk on a different level. They resemble each other very, very closely, but in completely different ways. Of course, the special set I mentioned with Ghost Rider earlier on, and Starjammers bringing very similarly, of course, the draw 3, 1 per deck, as well as, that Penance Stare, their version, of course, famously named the Raza. And that doing the same thing, discard all place cards, target character may not attack, except instead of a multi-8, they got an 11 any power, 1 per deck. And then just to sort of cap things off, because, Ghost Rider, of course, he had the DS, plus he also had the AI opponent. They were like, well, Starjammers can't be outdone by that. I'm sure this is what the conversation was, at Marvel when they were creating this. They were like, Starjammers can't be outdone by the Ghost Rider. And then they were like, well, Starjammers knows Professor X, don't they? And then somebody was like, yeah, Starjammers knows Professor X. Let's make Professor X a cameo in the Starjammers character card as a special, an 8 any power, non 1 per deck. That's what the Starjammers need. I don't think they're not good enough. That's what they need. And then, whoever was listening to that was just like, I love the Starjammers. That's an amazing idea. And the Starjammers, I'm sure, was born and something along those lines. Um, so as you can understand, Starjammers on equal footing, if not in some people's eyes better, if not in some people's eyes just slightly less than Ghost Rider. Ask me in person. I'll tell you what I truly think between the two and who I think is truly better. I'm sure you realized it when I said Ghost Rider is my favorite character in all of OverPower. But I will submit and actually say in this particular deck that jammers with their stats and what they bring to the deck is just it is the build. It is the best build of an overpower deck that there was at the time, period. It was the top tier. It was the only deck to play if you were truly serious and wanted to win as many games as humanly possible. As you can see, I was pushing it just even with a variant version of this to an undefeated tournament. So here we go. Not only is there the balance that we were referencing for the stats, everything being backed up, including down to these unique intellect 5s. Now, the power cards obviously being phenomenal because, like I mentioned earlier, you have the 8 energies, you have the split grid 7s, 1/7 energy, 1/7 fighting, and 1/7 any power. And then, of course, you have the 6, same scenario. And then the 5, as I mentioned, then the 4s. You can, of course, do multis or just mix in any other colors that you truly needed for the teamworks. Now, that is what I'm going to mention next. This deck, as much as it was a big boy special deck and a team defense deck, this deck was very much a teamwork deck. You could get as much as, at the time, 6 non-duplicate teamworks in the deck. 7 if you really wanted to play the Doctor Strange one and wait until he comes up. I wouldn't recommend doing that, but just potential. I didn't want anybody out there to say there could be 7. So, 6 teamworks that could be unduplicated in this deck with tons of power cards that could fuel them because, again, a lot of the times you're using this special card defense to sort of prevent attacks or actions coming your way. And of course, on top of that, you still do have the ability to control the board somewhat with Scarlet Witch and her ability to knock off cards of bigger ilks on the other side, opponent's side. So it really was just everything you could ask for. It was big cards, it was stats, it was teamworks that were all backed up. Didn't matter if a character died. It was power cards that could be used defensively because you had the defense in your specials. It was, everything you could imagine in a deck. Well, then you paired it up with any heroes because obviously, as I mentioned, Devourer of Worlds was just too massive at the time. And you pair it up with any heroes and you just started to have this effect of big boy card after big boy card after big boy card. You have to understand, and I'm going to try and sort of put this in the listener's mind. When I say big boy card after big boy card, I mean you are getting everything from multi-8s to opponent discards to 8 any powers to 11 any powers to the Raz I mentioned to draw 3s, and then now you're going to top it with these any hero cards. Like, not only do you have to defend everything I just mentioned, but now I'm throwing a card a power leech that says you have to discard 4 cards if it hits you. The timing and the way you're able to sort of manipulate with the Lambo is just, it's unprecedented. Even I think today with the right battle site, it would still be an A+ tiered style deck. Even with any hero, without Dow, it would probably still not only hold its own, but, a current tournament player, I also took the deck to a 10-0 tournament in a recent tournament as well, playing it with any heroes. So, like it still has oomph to that deck. It's just now in the current tournament environment is probably a lot more answers for what that deck brings to the table than there used to be, with Dow not being there, and the meta sort of truly inspecting and investigating a lot of battle sites and finding different ways through battle sites to sort of slow or beat the Lambo. So you got to understand, like, this was a time, it was a good time and a dark time in Overpower. This happened at a unique time because Overpower was just doing so well. Like, we were back playing the game. We'd been playing it now for a couple of years. And all of a sudden this deck came around that just, it was the clear best deck. Like, there was variants of it, and then there was other types of decks that could just, try to beat it every once in a while. But this deck just won on such a regular, especially when you teamed it up with the Any Heroes, and you just sort of, told people they couldn't even play battle sites at that particular time. I almost want to say it was like a good 3 or 4 years of just solid Lambo deck. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Like, it was the best deck. There were other people tried random other things, but for 3 or 4 years, it truly just was like the best deck there was. If you wanted to win the tournament, you either had to submit and like play this deck or like a variant of it, or you just submitted to sort of like playing in tournaments and, you know, I don't want to be rude about it, but never truthfully giving yourself a shot at winning the tournament because, anytime you played against this deck, it just had everything, every answer, for everything your deck could potentially throw at it. It really was just a top tier, meta killer at the end of the day. So, like I said, for about 3 years now, at this point in the tournament scene, Phil Keffer had left for personal and random other reasons. And, I was still playing. I was really enjoying the camaraderie. It's something I've always personally loved about Overpower, and why I always love going to tournaments and, meeting new people, is because you just never know when you're going to meet a new great friend at one of these tournaments or one of these sort of get-togethers. And not only do you get to continuously meet these people, but you get to know them and learn about their lives. And the camaraderie at Overpower tournaments has and probably will always be, other than the competitive side, and I love winning, the reason why I go to these tournaments. So again, out there, if you are listening, I do highly recommend that you attempt to try to go to an Overpower get-together or tournament near you. So he leaves the game, and the game keeps going on, and tournament after tournament after tournament, I've just submitted to playing the full Lambo, and I'm just tuning this car. I'm telling you, like an F1 driver, I am just pulling out the garbage. This thing is light, it's fast, it's unreal. I've stripped it of everything. The gas mileage to the deck was it was the perfect 56 cards. Like, literally the perfect 56 cards. To the point that my, one of my final tournaments with it, I believe was the Overpower Championships. I can't remember which year. And I ended up taking that Lambo version to another 10-0 tournament run. Of course, not to pat myself on the back. My accolades are many and long when it comes to Overpower. But, I just wanted to sort of talk about how much I tuned that deck to the point where, I was already, winning a lot of the tournaments back then, with an 8-2 or, a 9-1, and 7-3, whatever the scenario may be. But everybody knows the golden 10-0 is, almost impossible to reach in OverPower. That's just such an amazing day of OverPower where, nobody could touch you and your deck was just perfect. And yeah, I want to say that, tuning that Lambo to that version was just, it was just amazing, truthfully. And I'm going to kind of run over that version for you right now. So if you want to take it to a tournament near you, you can, by all means, give it a run. But as I mentioned, a lot of the times with the, as we talk about the Lambo, new drivers, when you put a brand new driver in a Lambo, they're probably going to crash it. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made, and the I won't say that the blade is very thin on it, but you are walking a bit of a line when it comes to how you place and how you play the actual full Lambo build. But of course, it's a phenomenal car when it comes to it. Before I get into the specifics of the build, I kind of want to talk about what the deck is known as today. And this sort of is an interesting thing because, everybody knows the sickness that shall not be named came around and hit all our lives in a very unique way. Well, one of the ways that it hit OverPower was it closed the borders. And when the borders closed, of course, the OverPower world was highly severed, as it's very heavily sort of populated, obviously throughout many places of the US, but also in, I would say, Canada. And the two groups no longer being able to sort of get together and play sort of created a unique scenario for the Lambo. Obviously, the Canadian group being a lot smaller, we still got together, but we didn't really play any sort of like larger tier tournaments. The Americans, though, through some graces of opening states and certain things, were able to get together in slightly larger groups. And what happened was they took this Lambo deck, and I'm sure people might chagrin at me when they see me in person over this version of the story, but they basically took this like finely tuned, beautiful car that after just dominating in the tournament scene, I believe actually at the time the powers that be that now run the game were highly involved even back then with rulings and other things along those lines. And they actually took the deck that I won with, that 10-0 run of the Lambo, and I remember I opened it up so everybody could actually see it that was there that day at the tournament. So they actually got to physically see what was in the deck and how it played, because at that particular time I said, I'm never going to play this deck again. It's just John Elway kind of run. You just rest it and you just say that you did what you were built for. So I'd opened it up and I showed everybody the actual innards of the car. I'm unsure, but I believe there may or may not be a photo of that out there somewhere floating around in the OverPower world. But what was very funny about that is I know a photo was taken of it by somebody, because the group that sort of like was trying to keep the game going, next time I saw them were like, oh, that deck that you won with, we actually took it card for card and we reprinted it on random cards to give to new players so that they could play it and sort of like have a shot at a tournament just with sort of like a built-in deck. And I kind of took that as one of the greatest compliments you could sort of get, that they sort of looked at this as like the perfect deck that the brand new player could use. But also, I mean, again, I did give it many warnings. It does drive fast. But of course, you also could potentially win a tournament with it. That's how good the deck was. And of course, always giving onus to its original creator. But the version was just so perfect. It was just so good. And this group again, much homage, printing it up and giving it out as almost like literally a sealed version to people. Just here you go. Here's the 56 cards. Go out and play. Quite the compliment. Obviously, I appreciate it. So of course, what happened though is they took this deck and they said, um, as I imagine American ingenuity always does, and says, well, we can make this better. And and they decided, let's take this Lamborghini and let's put some power windows on it, and I want three wipers. I want three wipers so I can see when it rains. And they didn't. I think they lost the conceptual idea of all gas, all fast. And understanding that a great offense destroys everything and wins games, especially at that particular time. But again, like I said, a lightly edged sword. So what happened is they all started playing the Lamborghini and they realized, how finicky it was and how much you could potentially crash the deck if you didn't play it right. And I think what happened is over the next corresponding couple of years, while COVID or the sickness that shall not be named was going on, a lot of American tinkering started happening with the deck, and they politely now coin it as the Cadillac, as it is easy to drive, as they have inserted such random cards as potentially like Starjammer's numerical avoids, and Scarlet Witch's numerical avoids, and potentially like Spawn 4 intellects, and other cards that just in the Lambo version wouldn't be there, because again, all gas, all fast is what you're looking for when it comes to that sort of deck. So I think what's really good now is, now you understand where the sort of name change came from. And then obviously after the borders reopened and the game sort of got back together, well, the Lambo had become the Cadillac, because that's the deck that was being played, was this sort of like lightly bigger, bulkier, easier to drive style of deck, as opposed to the fast, lean version of the Lambo. So I think at this particular time, the only thing I'm going to do before I talk about the actual build of the deck is I'm just going to sort of reference, I know on the online world and boards, a lot of people sort of go, well, what is a Cadillac? What is a Cadillac variant? Well, again, as I mentioned, the Cadillac would be the exact same four characters. So Starjammers, Spawn, Doctor Strange, and Scarlet Witch. Now, of course, it probably isn't a 56 card deck. I'm sure it's maybe around like a 64 card deck with a bunch of just, additional extra cards that maybe sort of space things out and make it a little bit easier on maybe the dupe ratio, as well as maybe some potential easier placing slots and so on in that regard. Now, that would be just the general Cadillac, okay, for anybody's sort of mental world. Now, a Cadillac variant usually, and by usually I mean sort of stems from the idea of the two crutches, the Spawn Doctor Strange crutch center. So having those two characters, obviously Spawn on the front line, Strange in reserve, and just applying either, one of the negators and an additional character of your choice, blank, would be known as a Cadillac variant or a Cadillac shell. Now this would, of course, just is referencing the team defense that you are gaining from Spawn through the 1 to 9 and the 1 to 6 from Doctor Strange in reserve. So again, that would be the reference to a Cadillac shell or a Cadillac reference for the people who, never really understood what we were all talking about in terms of terminology. So I'm just going to get into the build now, and then of course you can take the Lambo out to a track near you or a tournament near you and see how you do with it. So the build in my eyes, and of course, I'm going to give you the build that I would do. And of course, I'm sure it'll be roughly in the 56 card range as we discuss it now, because I'm just going to tell you it off the top of my head. That's how much I played it, as I would know it to that respect. And I'm going to give you descriptions as to why I play what I play. So I'm going to start right away with Spawn in the center. A little bit of a controversial thought here, but I think something that sort of works in the grand scheme of things. So Spawn being the tent pole of this particular deck, holding down the grids all around, as well as, providing that team defense, can potentially actually get attacked a lot when it comes to a deck. The way I sort of looked at Spawn was I need those 1-9s. That is what he is in this deck particularly for. So I put 3 Spawn Protectors of the Innocents, 1-9s in the deck. So I have 3 Spawn 1-9s. I then at that point obviously still want a little bit of oomph from Spawn himself. I decided to play one of his multi-4s, mimic an additional attack, as well as one of Spawn's 7 strengths as well. Then a lot of people go, well, come on now, you say the next one, like you obviously played his 1 per deck. I did not play his 1 per deck in particular in this deck. Again, I was looking for every card to do exactly what I needed it to do. I didn't want you to be able to sort of do something that my brain wasn't ready for. And what I'm referencing is Spawn's finite power. So Spawn's finite power is target character may not attack unless opponent discards 2 cards that the character can use, and then they can throw an attack. Well, that doesn't happen very often, but from time to time that does occur, and it occurs at the worst moment you could ever possibly fathom. So I particularly don't run that card. I have in the past, and I'm not saying I wouldn't in the future, depending on what I'm asking Spawn to do from a deck. Now in the Lambo, I'm asking him to defend and bring just a little bit of oomph and hold the grids down for the team. So I really just run a 5-card set for Spawn in that particular Lambo run. Over to Scarlet Witch. In that particular world, obviously she's your negator. I'm running 3 negates for her. I'm running 2 of her opponent discards. Obviously it's a phenomenal card. You could run more, you could run less. I think that's a really nice number for her in particular, because I'm not trying to overwhelm her with specials in case she potentially gets killed. And then I'm also running as well her multi-8 1 per deck. On the Starjammer side, I am running his 11 any power. I am running I believe there's several of them on the team. I am running the draw 3 as well for Starjammers. I am running their Raza 1 per deck as well. And then for Professor X, I'm running 2 of them. Now, a lot of people only run 1 of them because Starjammers is a big target on this particular deck. The way I look at it as a 8 any power is, if a card's not a 1 per deck, I always say to people, don't make it a 1 per deck. If it's good enough to go in your deck, then it's probably good enough to have multiple copies of it. Now, that's not always true with all cards, but I do generally keep that as a rule of thumb, is don't make a card a 1 per deck if you don't have to. Of course, every deck has different thoughts and reasons and so on. That card, obviously, everybody, without even having to explain the game too much, would understand that an 8 any power is just a huge card. That could be someone's premier card, let alone one of their 3rd or 4th card in their special set. So, and then for Doctor Strange, now this one's a funny one. A lot of people are always like, this is the cursed card. It always comes up. You will always duplicate this card. It's a 6 or less avoid. So a lot of times you'll place it immediately, and you may or may not use it depending on what happens both in that particular round or, as people place and concede. A lot of the times I find that you do duplicate this card quite a few times in a game. But you have to remember, when you're playing this particular deck, you want the team defense. So even duplicating it is still worth it to you because you then have it for that particular round. So I'm referencing the 6 or less avoid from Doctor Strange in Reserve, and I run 3 of them in that particular deck. In the special card, or sorry, in the power card range, I am running 3 of the 8 energies. I am running 1/7 fighting, 1/7 any power, and 1/7 energy. Then in the 6s, I'm running 1/6 fighting, 1/6 any power, and 1/6 energy. In the 5s, I was running 2/5 intellects and 1/5 any power. In the 4s, I was running 2/4 multi-powers. Sorry, 3/4 multi-powers. In the 3s, I was running 2/3 multi-powers. So the 4s I was running 3, and then the 3s I was running 2 of. And then I was running 1/2 multi-power and then 1/1 multi-power. So you can see I had a plethora of multi-powers at the bottom, but of course that was because of the teamworks we were running. So now I was running a lot of teamworks in this particular deck. I was running both fighting, so the 6 fighting teamwork and the 7 fighting teamwork. I then was also running the 6 any power teamwork as well. I was running the 8 energy teamwork. And then I was also running at that particular time, I believe, the 7 energy teamwork. And then I was running 1 ally, which was the strength 5 to use, 3 attack ally card. So that was sort of my universe cards. I believe it was 5 total that I was using in that respect. So the 4 teamworks, and then the 1 ally card. So that was sort of the build I was doing in terms of the Lambo. Now, I was playing it with any heroes at that particular time. I think today, should I play this deck again in the future, I particularly think I would maybe, do a deep dive and study battle sites again and sort of see if there's a battle site that really complements it. I don't really think that the Lambo and battle sites have truly been melded together in the same ilk the way the Any Hero version worked back in the day. Now, of course, today, Devourer of Worlds is not playable in the tournament scene, so please understand that when I do reference that I wouldn't normally play this with Any Heroes anymore. Now, in the Any Hero world, though, they have created Cataclysms, and in that card set, there is a draw 3. Now, that works really well if you do play the deck in the Any Hero build and using the draw 3, because of course then you would have particular access to both the Cataclysm draw 3 as well as the Starjammers draw 3. So there's a lot of draw potential in the deck, and ways that you could even just win really fast, really early with the new Any Hero build that they have at the moment. But of course, generic Any Heroes that would go in there would be Guardian Angel, you would have Confusion, you'd have the Gamma Terror, you would have Death from Above, you would have Fortress of Solitude, you'd have Power Leech, you would have... Oh, it's so hard when I always try to memorize them. I believe it was 9 total in the grand scheme of them. And that's when they took out Devourer of Worlds, so it would have been 10 with the Cataclysm back again. But of course, I always personally wouldn't want you to build exactly the same Lambo. You do use the Any Heroes that you think are best for the deck. There is just a basic set of the generic ones that most people use, and then of course, there's always, the accoutrements or special ones that you can always pull out of the woodwork if it, for some reason, works towards your deck. Now, of course, in the current age of OverPower as well, you have different home bases. You have different, battle site options because of the lack of the Devourer of Worlds. And of course, you still do have great access to, like I said, a lot of Any Heroes that can sort of bring a lot of oomph to your deck as well. So if you do attempt to drive the Lambo, make sure that you act accordingly and practice your driving before you head to a tournament. And of course, for all the other people out there, maybe you just want to take the Lambo build and you want to build a Winnebago on the back of the Lambo, and you just want to feel comfy, cozy in your couch while you're driving the Lambo, and you can do that too. I'm sure there's tons of different Lambo variants, or as the internet may say, Cadillac variants. And I want to just say thank you. I hope you enjoyed, that sort of historic lesson version to it, as well as possibly a future rendition of the Lambo as well. If you do bring a Lambo variant or the Lambo itself to a tournament, and I happen to be at that tournament, please tell me how you do, and tell me how it drives, and tell me what parts you put in it that you think are different than what I would particularly have put in it. So thanks again for listening. This is Marcel, the greatest Overpower player ever. You are listening to the Overpower Mountain podcast. I appreciate it. Like, subscribe, keep listening, and I will see you soon at a tournament near you.